feel
Mhm.
like just back in the day, it's so interesting times of just like fucking around and finding out type of energy.
Yep, yeah, on many levels, like the business level and really the music too.
Mhm.
Like now, yeah, there's all these great videos out there, and you can get a lot of free instruction if you know where to look on YouTube. There's a lot of great stuff out there for whatever instrument you play. And like just using bass playing as an example, there was no book or really instruction for death metal bass. I mean, when I
Yeah.
started playing, when Cannibal Corpse started, death metal had been around for 4, maybe 5 years, depending on when you say it all started. And so just kind of try and figure it out. Like, what do you do with this new form of music? There wasn't some traditional schooling for the guitar, any of the musicians, the vocalists, certainly not for producers. So everybody was learning as they went, and with us, like, and a lot of the death metal bands, we were lucky to find more sound studios
Hmm.
because they really figured out how to make great productions for this kind of music. In my opinion, they were some of the first really great productions in our genre were done at Morris Sound. Because I can hear on some of the early 80s death and thrash that some of these producers, they must have been like, what the hell do I do with this music?
Yeah,
And you could tell
yeah.
that certain productions ended up being kind of awkward. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, things have changed. Now you can be a beginning band and, go right into a studio or figure it out yourself and do it at home with the way technology is now, So back then, yeah, in the 80s, it was really, we were all just figuring it out. And some of the results, looking back at them, you can see, wow, we had a long way to go, but,
Yeah.
you live and learn.
I think what's so cool about you, Alex, too, it's like you kind of like pop the question. It's like, oh, like there's no death metal like instruction manual or whatever. Like, what do you do? But what you do is become a pioneer of it, you make it
Mm.
your own. And like it's such like an exciting time. Like I couldn't imagine. I was just like a child around that time when you guys
Mm.
started like booming and everything. But that must have been just interesting to see how people and crowds react and to see the rise in popularity of it as well. That must have
Mm-hmm.
been so cool, man.
Yeah, it really was. And nobody knew where things were going to go. And, so for us and many other bands that were around back then are still doing it today, and plus there's been steady development of death metal throughout the past, 30, 40 years. Is it really 40? I guess, yeah, depending on where you start. A lot of people think, like maybe some of the early Death demos and Possessed's first album and that sort of thing. I think that's all around 1983-ish, we're thinking, or even earlier. So we're talking like 40 years of a genre, and it's still around, and there's been steady growth and new bands coming into it throughout the whole time. But yeah, in the 80s, everybody was, you know, nothing was established. So it was kind of anything goes, you're everybody who was doing it, though. I think the idea kind of was that it was going to be sort of a dark, horrifying side of metal, taking those kind of the horror aspect, you know, that was really like some of the movies I mentioned earlier, like The Shining, The Exorcist, those kind of things. I feel like those movies, in a way, may have had a little influence on the genre. Hard to say, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand in some
Yeah.
ways. And yeah, so it's cool. It was something new, even for us coming into it a few years after the very beginnings. It was still really new, and you could just add whatever you wanted, and you can still do that, but it's obviously a lot more established at this point.
Definitely. Even I just remember media back in the 90s too. Like it was such a vibe of like extreme metal almost being dangerous, and there was like protests and
Mm.
like insane stuff like that. And now like I noticed just like in this kind of generation, it's more like people get it that it's just art and stuff. And
Mm.
even the way you guys get promoted and like getting to do all these crazy music videos and stuff, which back in the day it must have been so much harder to do. And